Hello, my name is Milorad, and today I'm going to be discussing changes to Shinuyama in Dominion 6 and new considerations in how this nation relates to the new spells and mechanical changes. This is not intended to be a national overview on how to play this nation. There are other guides on YouTube for Dominions 5 that are still largely relevant to how Shinuyama plays in Dominion 6. I recommend that you look those up. I think Lucid Tactics has one, and there's a couple others. This is going to be a longer video. I'm going to be getting into a lot of depth, especially with spells. Um, okay, so looking at this, the roster, it appears like nothing has changed just from looking at this. However, that is not the case because there's going to be a lot of mechanical changes under the hood. And some hidden changes at the first appearance do not look like anything has changed. So first we're going to talk about scales and economy, and then we're going to talk about changes to units and summons, and then spells and pretenders in that kind of approximate order. Okay, so the first important thing is scales. In Dominions 5, Shinuyama was considered a scales heavy nation because he has no recruitable sacreds and everything can be made in every fort. If you look at the cap site, there's nothing that's cap recruitment. So this nation was heavy scales, could scale very well because everything can be made in every fort. So there were two major ways to play Shinuyama with regards to troops in Dominions 5. You could do like a Bakemono show spam, which is more recruitment points than resources, so you would go like order 3. Or you could focus heavily on a Dai Bakemono, which is more resources, so you would go like prot 3. And other troops are really like specialists. Now in Dominion 6 they have a turmoil bias in the build. So you cannot go order 3 if you don't pick a pretender that has order bonus. You can only go order 1, which really limits your ability to just shit out a million of these. Also, you cannot go production 3 unless you have a pretender that has a production bonus. Now, most nations are limited to Magic 2, but you can go to Magic 3. So that is one, bonus you have from the new scale system. But, this turmoil limit, as well as how they affected all scales, you can only go up to 2 in most cases unless you have a pretender, really impacts this nation. So I'm going to show you, kind of like what your options are. You don't have a lot of options too, is the problem. So like this is Eastern Asian pretender choices as well as some others. But you can see just from looking at this, there are only 2 options to do production. So you have the Tiger, which most people don't think of Shinuyama as needing like a expander, and this kind of limits your choices on the rest of the build. Or you have a Titan, and this guy gives both order and productivity. So just to show, because I did build one with him, you would never think to do this in Dominions 5. Who does an imprisoned Titan, right? But now if you want to have very high order and production for troops, you would need to do it with this guy. So you can see here with imprisoned, it gives you lots of points to spend, and you can do this. But then an imprisoned Titan is, you're paying more design points to get less options. You could do him dormant instead, but and then have him like in a defender role, like call it the defender titan. But these are not great paths for that. He's vulnerable, of course, to mind duel with this 5 astral, so he's not super good in a defender role. You can't do imprisoned. Where is it? Yeah, you can't really do like an imprisoned immobile like you could in Dominions 5 to do very high scales. You just can't. You're limited to 1 order 2 prot, which is not really a scales build in a traditional sense, right? Okay, but we're going to talk more about these later when we get to the pretenders. But I did want to say that these scale changes are very impactful to Shinuyama. However, there is a plus side because of the overall economy changes. Scales aside, Shinuyama benefits from Dominion 6 because of the higher gold, higher population, and more recruitment points, which benefits all troop-heavy nations, and Shinuyama is one of those. So now you could put out like more of these than you could in Dominions 5, even with adjusting for the issues with the scale that we talked about. Okay, so now we're done with the economy section. I want to talk about changes to troops. So like an important issue is the change in the size mechanic. I talked about this in another video which I specifically released about size mechanics that I will link in the description, but I will briefly mention the parts about Shinuyama again here. So all the size 1 guys are now size 2, and they can fit 5 to a square instead of 6. So in some ways this is the debuff because you have a lower attack density in a square, but it's also a buff in a way because it allows them to take up more space on the battlefield for the same gold cost, and they're slightly less vulnerable to area of effect spells and attacks because now you only lose 5 and 6 instead of 6. Also, Daibakemono are size 4. So, in Dominions 5, you put 2 in a square and that's it. Because 2 size 3 takes up a whole square. Here, 2 size 4 is 8. You have a room for 2 more. So that means that these guys can fill a square with 2 Daibakemono, which is important because it adds to the survivability of the Daibakemono because there's another target in the square with them, and it increases the killiness of the 2 of these guys because they have a 3rd guy in them with them. Also, this is relevant because you can fit in swarm bugs or asps or salamander because they have 2 free size points in their square. These guys are often used in a blocking role where you put a huge line of them, and then either these will filter through or these, or you can use like the other spells, the asps and the swarm bugs and all that. Okay, the other thing is that Daibakemono are cheaper than they were in Dominions 5. This was like I think 31 resources, and I think this was 35 resources. So this is slightly easier to make. As far as I can tell, nothing else has really changed except the consideration with the bandits. These were rarely used, but sometimes people use it to raid because you have these guys led by this one. He could raid, but now you can't. Because if you look at here, they got rid of raid. They replaced it with the move and pillage, but you have to have a very high map move of 20, which they do not. Because he only has 12 and the other guys have 10. So they cannot move and pillage, which kind of reduces the use case for these that you would ever want to build them. There are still some uses for bandits because as stealthy guys, they can stand still, whereas the other stealthy ones are like undisciplined and they run all over the place. And they have armor and a good weapon. Uh, okay, so now piercing damage has been slightly debuffed in Dominions 5, which impacts the Yari guys, right? So like in Dominions 5, everyone will build these, um, or this one if you want it even cheaper in mountains. Um, the thing is now that piercing on average does 1 to 2 less damage against medium or high protection targets. Um, because of this, the Yari is still better than the spear because it has higher damage and it's two-handed, so it accepts the strength buffs better. However, there's more use case, I think, now for the Bakemono warrior than it was in Dominions 5. I would see like not very many people build these, but he's slashing half the time. And slashing is, I think, other people have said this and I tend to agree, slashing is now better than Pierce in Dominions 6, and he has slashing half the time, and he has higher attack and better morale. So I think there's more reason to build him, and he's only slightly more expensive than the Yari one. Okay, the other big combat change that heavily affects Shinuyama is bow strength. So now bows are half scaling instead of third. So all of the bows have received a buff in damage. So like the Bakemono Archer now is 10, Bandit is 11, and then most important, this one is now 16, which is very high damage. And then when he is, in Dominions 5, he did 14 damage with the bow, and then if you put Strength of Giants on them, because it was third scaling, you would only get +1, so it'd be 14. Sorry, 15. Now, because of half scaling, the strength spells like Gift of Giant Strength will give him +2. So 18 is now as good as the Great Bow on Hinom and Naba archers, but this guy is better in melee than both of those. So ton of damage. However, it's a double edge for Shinuyama because it makes all of your Bakemono Sho more vulnerable to short bows in expansion and archery in general. So like he has 7 protection in the body, right? In Dominions 5, they could semi-reliably survive a hit to the torso with the short bow. Now I have found from expansion testing, because I played a lot of them in the last week or so, that they are frequently one-shot by an indie short bow, because with 7 protection, the short bow will bring it down to 6, and then it's 11 damage on an average short bow human. So you're talking about 5 plus DRN versus 6 plus DRN, whereas it was different in Dominions 5. So I found that like torso hits, which are relatively common, like I think it's 40% of the time, are like a semi-reliable one-shot kill. And then of course you have the head hit, which is 10%, which will always kill them, or almost always kill them. So now like half the time, these guys are being one-shot by short bows, which is a problem. Well, not really half the time, but you'll notice it. Like it's far more noticeable than in Dominions 5. And then these have better armor, but they can still be one-shot by short bows, whereas that would typically not be the case in Dominions 5. So I found that this can lead me into the next topic, but like I found expansion to be harder than in Dominions 5 because the Bakemono Sho are more vulnerable to arrows and they do slightly less damage, which is most noticeable against cavalry, especially because the mount now is like its own unit, so you have to do more damage to really disable the cavalry, because half the time you're hitting a mount. Well, maybe not half the time, but some of the time you're hitting the mount. So it's even harder for these guys to gang up on cavalry. So, like, in Dominion's 5, you would um, reinforce your expansion with a foreign recruit, because these guys can be built in mountains and highlands. Um, this is still, of course, possible in Dominion 6, but it's less viable because um, these guys die easier and it's easier to get out HP route. Um, your starting army is better because it now has, instead of just these terrible club guys and the undisciplined bows, you also get, I think, 20 of these. So it is somewhat better. Um, and then with him leading them, like, you can pretty easily like put out enough of these so you end up having like 100 troops in your expansion army. But believe it or not, 100 of a combination of this, and this, there are provinces they cannot reliably take, because you will see that they depending on what the independent population types are, they can still die and not expand, or they'll expand with such heavy losses that you have to bring them back to reinforce. So I think expansion is definitely harder. I actually, in some of my testing, added Obakamono. Like, this is not a great unit, but he has 13 body prot and like a lot of HP, and hits really hard. To like, he can one shot a lot of humans. The problem is, of course, he's undisciplined, but he's so cheap to make in resources and recruitment points that I actually found myself using these, whereas I almost never did in Dominions 5 in the expansion phase. These are still, even with their reduction in cost, these are still too expensive in resources, even with production 3, to make them for expansion initially. Okay, so now we're done with the troops. I want to talk about changes to summon mages, because this is very significant. You are a secret glamour nation. It's like double glamour because you're glamour on the glamour. Bad joke, yeah. But anyway, 4 of the national mages now have glamour. Oh, by the way, this is a very good mod by Sturm called Better National Overview. Okay, so 4 of your national mages have glamour magic. Okay, so we're gonna go over them one by one. Mujina is Conjuration 5. In Dominions 5, it was 1 Earth, 2 Nature with 50% random. Now he has 1 Earth, 1 Nature, and 2 Glamour. I did make these occasionally in Dominions 5 because they were mage assassins. But outside of that, they don't have a ton of use because you already have 2 Nature on Uba randoms. And some of them have the Earth, so you would have the cross path already for forging. However, this is much more useful now in Dominions 6, because not only is it still a good assassin, it has a ritual spell utility, which we will get to later. Okay, so now Tanuki in Dominions 5 was 1 Earth, 2 Nature with 100% random. Now it's 1 Earth, 1 Nature, 2 Glamour with 100% random. I almost never made these in Dominions 5 because you already had recruitable 2 Nature and all of the cross paths you already had on other mages except for Fire Nature. But like, Fire Nature is not super useful. There's like only a couple items to make and like not very good rituals. Like, Fire Ants suck. But and you only got it like 1 out of 4 times, right? But now I see myself definitely using these because of the glamour. Now, a consideration is that the Mujina is cheaper to make by 5 nature gems, and it's not a heretic. This one's a heretic. However, he has a guaranteed cross path, whereas the other one does not. And there are both spells and items that you can make with Glamour Fire cross path which are much better than a nature fire cross path. But if you want combat utility, I would say in most cases Mujina is better. Excuse me. Okay, Kitsune is the extremely important one to talk about. So in Dominions 5, this was 3 nature with a bunch of 50% randoms, which was including, air and astral, which you did not have access to otherwise. This is now 3 nature. 3 glamour, 1 nature. This is a very impactful change, and it's not all positive, because now you do not have access to a high-level nature caster, because your Uba can only get 2 nature. In Dominions 5, I would use the Kitsune, because with 3 nature, she can hold the wand, the Thistle Wand, to cast like a very high-level spells like Relief, because Relief goes well with Rigor Mortis, which you can cast, or Quagmire, which you can also cast if you want to do a fatigue play. However, now the only way to get this would be like very lucky randoms, and then she'd have to hold a Thistle Vine and a Moonvine, Thistle Mace and a Moonvine Bracelet to get very high. So it's not reliable. However, 3 Glamour is a very good is a very good base path. And if you get very lucky, like 1 in 20 will be Glamour 4. But even without that random, she can make the Glamour hat at Construction 5 and wear it. And if she randoms Earth, which she has a good chance of, she can put Earth boots on and make the Mirage Crystal booster. So with both that and the hat, she's now Glamour 5. And she can cast, what is that? Gate of Horns and Ivory, or whatever it's called, which is like the gem generator for Glamour. But we'll talk more about the spells in the next section. But you have very solid access to Glamour now with this mage. And this is a Conjuration 6 mage. It only requires nature to cast. This guy, or this lady, Yorogumu, I rarely use these in Dominions 5 because you have most of those paths on your other mages. These paths are identical as they were in Dominions 5, except now she also has 1 Glamour. This mage is more relevant in Dominion 6 because she has a guaranteed water Glamour cross path, which is important, and 1 in 5 lucky random. She can make she could be 3 nature and take over that role from the Kitsune, but it's not reliable. Okay, so now you have 4 mages that have give you Glamour access. So and they all, if I'll show you here, they're all castable with nature. So you have Mujina, Takanuki, Kitsune, and Yorogomo, but you have all these paths on your Ubas. So you can easily get into Glamour without needing a Glamour mage pretender. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to talk about spells. This is going to be a long section. I'm going to go school by school and talk about spells and how they synergize with Shinuyama. I am mostly going to be talking about new spells or spells that have changed, because I don't want to repeat, especially people who have already played the game. Like, a lot of this is already known knowledge. I don't want to repeat like what we already know is good with Shinuyama. So I'm going to be mostly focusing on the new spells that were added or spells that were changed. But there are a couple old spells that I think are newly relevant to Shinuyama that I want to also talk about. Okay, so Conjuration, and one more thing. I'm not going to talk about every possible thing. It will go on for too long. I just want to highlight like important ones in my opinion. Okay, so in Conjuration 4, you have a Nest of Salamander and a Nest of Asp. So these are both very easy for you to cast. Like Ubas with the random nature can cast these, and then all of your sorcerer guys can cast these. And so can the small ones with a if he uses a gem to cast Phoenix Power. But these are really important spells, in my opinion, in the middle game because if you remember, the Dai Bakemono Archer is often used in a blocking role, and he has 2 free spaces, and this creates a bunch of size 1 snakes. Same with this one, and they can fit in nicely with the Dai Bakemono, and they do huge amounts of poison damage, especially these. Like they do death poison on the bite, and there's going to be like a ton of them, 10. And then these do like a fire poison in the description, and they have heat power. So if you go heat, they'll be even better. They'll be faster and more higher attack. And like this really helps both slow down the enemy, and if you cast it like behind a line of the archers, and if the enemy front line catches up to your Dai Bakemono archers, these can like filter in from behind and do huge amounts of poison damage. And because now poison also debuffs stats, it will make your Dai Bakemono even better in melee because the enemy will be debuffed by all the poison from the asps and the salamander. Okay, water kobold is very important because so all the Yorogumo can make these, or Tanuki with the water random. So what the water kobold is he's a sailing commander with size 5, which means all your troops can sail with him. He only has 10 leadership. However, you can easily build the authority mace at construction 3 or the whip at construction 5, which gives you tons of command. And then he can be like a utility and sail your troops all over the place, which is important because your troops are very slow, especially the Dai Bakemono. And once you cast one of him, he can self-reproduce because they all have these paths already, so he could just make more of them. So there's like a very important utility mage to move things around and do like you don't really want to use him for like surprise attacks because you won't be able to do formations and they'll have a morale penalty, but he can move things around. Cave kobolds are useful. All of your Tanuki and Mujina can cast these. They're useful for adding siege strength. Like you have other ways to get siege strength from summons like cave grubs. However, these don't need a cave to be cast, and they're stealthy so they can hide. Don't forget that these guys are all stealthy and they have magic leadership no matter, except for the death, but the other 3 will all have magic leadership. So you can lead 10 of the cave kobolds, and he can hide so they don't get killed, but they can add a lot of siege strength. Okay. And then all of your glamour mages will be able to cast Fey footfolk in forests, as well as like Fey Knights, and these are important. Well, not all of them can do this, but like the Kitsune can, or the others with the booster. But the reason these are important is because you don't have any magic weapons on this nation, and you don't have any sacred troops to give them magic weapons. But all of these Fey troops will have magic weapons on like innate, and if you decide to go cold, which you might because your troops are all like one map move anyway, um, if you go cold, you get the Unseelie, which is better than the Fey, in my opinion, because they have a cold power and cold protection. But even the other ones are good, the summer ones, because they have magic weapons. And then another spell that's new that's you can do with all your glamour mages is summon sprites. So these make the sprites that have the elf shot that does 100% fatigue when it gets hit, or 100 fatigue when they hit them. And it's only one glamour gem, and there's that spool at Construction 5 that gives you temporary glamour. So this is very easy to like cast. And this is useful because like, the sprites have I think 12 ammunition each, so you have 6 of them. That's a lot of arrows that will cost a lot of fatigue to the enemy. Okay, so again, I'm not going to go over every possible thing. I just wanted to highlight some. Okay, so Alteration. A couple new spells. Okay, so in level 3 you have Torpor. So what this is AoE 100%, 100 precision sleep spell. This gives your 2 nature Uba something to do offensively early in the early game that doesn't require a gem. So this is useful for them, for the Ubas. And it's against 11 MR, so it's like especially useful against nations with bad MR like middle-aged Ulm. Okay, so because you have so many glamour mages that cost a lot of nature to build and you don't have any innate nature income, you may want to consider having a pretender that can cast Mother Oak. Because, if you don't put it on your pretender, the only way to cast this is if you get a very lucky 3 nature on your Yorigumo and it has 2 boosters. But at that point, it's so late that like it will probably already been cast. If you don't have a Pangea in your game, or like another major nature power in the middle era, you could put this on your pretender, make the pretender dormant, and have your Ubas go out and search for nature sites early. Then if you cast this, it will make it easier for you to cast your national spells under Conjuration, because all of those Mujina, Tanuki, Kitsune, and this one as well all require quite a bit of nature. But these are all very powerful glamour mages, so you want to have a lot of nature income if you're going to do glamour. Now, obviously, you don't have to rely on the glamour mages, but if you're going to do glamour, you should probably try to get Mother Oak, which, I think you wouldn't really focus on, at least I didn't in Dominions 5, to think of doing Mother Oak on Shinuyama. I'm going to get back to these darkness spells in a minute, but let's do some other ones because that's going to be a longer discussion. So blood poisoning at Alteration 5, as well as venomous death. Ubas who are nature 2 can cast both of these. You want to think of these as a mind burn for nature, because it's 100 precision, it does a ton of damage with no MR check. Like there's MR check on this secondary decay, but there's no MR check on the initial. So the same with this one. And this is just a weaker form, but this does a ton of armor negating poison damage. So this is extremely useful at countering thugs or elite troops that do not have poison resistance. And this one, Venomous Death, even if they have poison resistance, this can get through and debuff them because you know how now poison causes a stat debuff. This is very powerful spells, and it gives your Uba something to do in combat without gems. Um, okay, so now I want to talk about the darkness spells. So you know, in Dominions 5, you could cast darkness with on a 3 death sorcerer random holding a staff. He could cast this, but you know it costs a lot of gems, and you are effectively doing solar eclipse because all your troops have 50% dark vision, so they would still get -3, -3. Um, so your opponent will have -6 if he has no dark vision. So really, it's only a 3-point differential. So it was essentially solar eclipse, but this was very expensive and hard to cast, right? Um, Now in Dominions 6, you can give your these spells did not exist in Dominions 5. You can give all your troops an additional 50% dark vision, which stacks on their original one. So now they have 100% dark vision. So that makes this spell better now. Um, in addition, you have Nightfall. So this is now a new way to cast darkness in addition to solar eclipse and the darkness spell. So what this means is that you know, first you have to cast Twilight. So like the Kitsune or the Tanuki or the Mujina with the extra gems or booster can cast this. And then after Twilight is up, you can then cast Nightfall. And then this will change Twilight into darkness, which is equivalent to like the solar eclipse darkness. Now, many nations who have lots of glamour, you would rather leave the Twilight up because it boosts all the glamour skills. But in your case, you're not going to have like a large number of glamour mages because they're all summons and they're expensive. So what you could do instead is have like, you know, Mujina or Katsuni like show up to a fight, cast Twilight, and then immediately cast Nightfall. And then this is much cheaper and easier to do than Darkness. It also comes earlier. And there is that spool at Construction 5 that gives a temporary gem. So it's much easier for her to cast one of those mages to cast Nightfall than it is for the, you know, it's very expensive to cast Darkness because if you're not playing with mods, I don't think there's any temporary death, at least not on pre-artifacts. There's no temporary gems for Darkness. You have to or for death. So you have to constantly carry around like tons of death. Whereas it's much cheaper to do Nightfall, and it's essentially the same effect without having, if you choose not to buff your troops with Cat Eye Warriors, right? So you can, and then the other advantage is that all of your Glamour Mages are stealthy, so they can show up like unexpected, and if your opponent does not have Nature Mages ready to cast Cat Eye Warriors, they're not going to be ready for Nightfall, and then all your troops are better now with the 3-point margin, or sorry, a 2-point margin, because it's they'll only get -1 because they have 50% dark vision base. Okay, there's new spells called Group Iron Skin and Group Stone Skin. You know, in Dominions 5 you had Marble Warriors, but these come sooner and they don't cost any gems. Now they have a low AoE, but you know, with a 3 Earth Bakemono Sorcerer, if he casts Earth Power, he can put this now on 4 squares. This is good on the Bakemono Show because they're so densely packed together. It's also good on the Dai Bakemono because especially the archers will stand still and accept the buffs, and this will make them much harder to kill. Because of increasing their natural protection. Okay, Eagle Eye Warriors. So this is worse than this is essentially True Shot Warriors, but for nature. It's worse because it's more expensive or harder to cast. I mean, however, in Dominions 5, you didn't have access to air unless you had a very lucky roll on your Kitsune, and you have a lot of archers in your troops. But now you can pretty easily cast this because all your 2 nature Ubas can cast this with extra gems or a booster, and this will give you precision, which is helpful on especially on the Daibokumono who have very powerful bows, and this will increase their precision, I believe, to 15 before any experience. Okay, another thing to talk about is there is no longer the ability to do a battlefield-wide bark skin easily, because in Dominions 5, mass protection was trivial for Shinuyama because it was 3 nature and cost 1 gem. So every Uba could do it who randoms nature. But now the mass protection equivalent is Oken Army, and your Ubas cannot cast this because even a nature 2 holding a Thistle Wand, she cannot cast this because it's too many gems for her to do, to boost, and then also this, like she's too many gems, she can't do it. You would have to have 2 boosters like the Moonvine as well, but that's already so late game to do both. Or you have to have a Yorogomo random holding a Thistle Mace, but again, that's not reliable. That's a 1 in 5 random on a Conjuration 6 summon. Okay, so now Evocation, there's not much to talk about here. One thing very early game is that Cold Bolt is now Area of Effect 1. It gives your Water 2 Ubas something to do early game in combat if you need to deploy them. The big change I think that's relevant to Shinuyama is that Wailing Winds is now Glamour instead of Death Air. It's now Glamour Air. So in Dominions 6, or sorry, in Dominions 5, you could cast Wailing Winds on an air random Oni Shugo with the staff or Dai-Oni. You did not lose access to it though with the changes in Dominion 6, because now the Kitsune has 3 Glamour base and has a decent chance to roll an air random, because if you look, she has 3 different chances to roll an air random. If my math was correct, I think it's 25% cumulative. I might be wrong on that, but you have a decent chance of getting at least 1 air. And then, with extra gem or a booster, she can cast Wailing Winds. This is arguably better than the Oni Shugo or the Dai-Oni because she's stealthy and can just appear randomly when your enemy doesn't expect it to cast Wailing Winds. And there's a Glamour Temp gem item, so it makes it cheaper to cast. Okay, construction. So Legions of Steel, the old one, the closest equivalent now is Soldiers of Steel. It has a lower area of effect, but it's still useful. All of your Bakemono your Bakemono sorcerers can cast this. And then you have Legions of Steel. There was no equivalent of this in Dominions 5, but this is now battlefield wide for only 1 gem. This is highly useful because all your Dai Bakemono have both good helmet and good body armor. So this will bring their armor up to 20 on the body and higher on the head. And this is very easy for your Bakemono sorcerers to cast. And you're going to be going up to Construction 7 anyway at some point, so you're going to get this along the way. Okay, so now Enchantment. So the Strength spells are harder to cast. Strength of Giants is no longer wide AoE for no gems. The closest equivalent is Giant Strength Warriors, which has a lower AoE and requires a gem, but it's a better scaling for your archers, especially the Dai Bakemono ones, because now they will get guaranteed +2. Whereas in Dominions 5, they will only get +1 because of the scaling changes. The other important thing is there are now lower level weapons of sharpness buffs. So this is the AoE 1, and then this is the AoE 20. But in Dominions 5, this was under construction 7, and that's like people would rarely go up that high, especially as an early research goal. But like it's conceivable you would want to go to enchantment, at least enchantment 5 for Horde of Skeletons, enchantment 6 for Foul Vapors. So you're going to get these along the way. If you want to go to enchantment 7, like you can do this to get this. But even the lower level one, this is very useful because you have by size 2 Bakemono Sho. So you can have a sorcerer with a group of, let's say, 3 squares of Bakemono Sho. He can buff them, and then you have 15 units doing AP damage. This is very useful to counter thugs who are raiding, or like other small groups of raiders that are relying on protection. Very useful. Okay, and then you have Flaming Arrows was changed. It used to be battlefield wide at level 4. Now you have the equivalent is all the way in level 7, but there is a lower level one that's easier to cast that all of your sorcerers can do with Phoenix Power and Fire in a Jar, and they can all cast this. And this is useful on any nation with short bows that are cheap, and you have 5 gold short bows in mountains, and they're densely packed together because you're having 5 to a square. So this is useful. There's also the nature version, which is poison arrows, which is this one, and then also this one. So this is useful on especially this one early, because all of your ubas can do this. And if you have 5 short bows in 1 square, they're going to apply poison. You're going to have a lot of short bows doing poison damage, which will debuff the enemy. It's less important that the poison kills them, but the poison can stack and cause their stats to drop. Stats to drop. Okay. One more thing in enchantment is this is a new type of spell, Earth Shatter and Earthquake Warriors, and then Earth Shatter Army. So Slash and Blunt do stun. Your blunt guys suck, like the club ones, but you also have the O Bakemono that have a club, and then a lot of your troops will be slashing. All the Dai Bakemono have swords that are slashing, and then there's also the Bakemono Sho that has a sword. Half the time does slashing. This will stun, so like size 4 or 5 have a chance to negate, and so does strength. And size 6 will I think always negate. But this is still useful, especially at this low level, because you can put this on 5 Bakemono Sho with the sword, and they can do stuns against human size enemies and like size 4s. Okay, so now we're moving to Thaumaturgy. So there's a new series of spells, Battle Fury, Furious Warriors, and Gift of the Furies, that give attack to your and morale to your troops. This is double useful. So all of your, this is easy to cast because all of your sorcerers have at least 2 fire. So this is easy for your nation to cast. And then the ones that cost gems, this one that costs gems, like this is also very easy to cast because of Fire in a Jar. And like with 20 AoE, you could get 100 theoretically Bakemono Show painted with this buff. And they don't have great morale, so the morale helps. And then the attack is great because like on the one with the sword, he goes up to 15. This is also useful on the especially this level. This is useful on the Dai Bakemono archers who stand still and can accept buffs. This will bring their attack score up to 15, which is very high. Okay, so then, sorry, I'm looking at my notes. Oh yeah, so Frighten and Panic and Terror are all different, because now in Dominions 5 or 6, they have a concept of lowering temporary morale. So like especially Panic, because of your Ubas, and this is a wide AoE, they can spam this and it doesn't affect friendly units. So like if the lines are clashing, you can have level 2 Ubas cast this, and because with the lowering the temporary morale, if I understand this correctly, they will run faster as they take casualties. It's not the same thing as fear, but it's useful because as the lines are taking casualties, they will route faster. Now this can be countered with Servant of Courage, but your opponent has to prepare for that. Okay, so under Glamour, Group Luck is something I want to highlight because you have Glamour mages that are summons, and in Dominions 5 you had no way to really get luck on your troops because you had no Astral except in a very rare randoms on your Kitsune. But now all of your Glamour summons have at least, well, majority of your Glamour summons have at least 2 Glamour, and they can paint this AoE 3+ luck, and that's extremely powerful on the Bakemono Show because size 2 with low HP benefit very well from group luck because there's so many of them, and they usually die quickly anyway. So this will be like much better at extending their lifespan, and you can get a lot of them. It's also very good, of course, on the Dai Bakemono. And then Charm got moved from Nature to Glamour, but you still have access to it because you have access to Glamour mages. Okay, and then you have a national spell that's new called Call of the Drugvant. So what this does is it says bandits, but it's not your national bandits. It's the shitty villains, and then devas. And like these are from the Kalem, like the flying guys with fear and magic weapons. So I used the debug sensei to test this, and you get maybe around 20 villains and some devas, like I don't know if it's like 1d6 or anything like that, but I got like between 5 and 10, and then they're led by a Holy 2 Deva. However, they do not accept your bless because they're not your troops, they're independent. It says that it's anonymous, which is true, but of course in a multiplayer game everyone will know it's you because it's a national spell. However, there's a very interesting thing that you can do, and I tested this by having 2 human. I was controlling both sides, and I did a nap with Binding Diplomacy. And then what ended up happening is, even though I had Binding Diplomacy, it did not give me the warning that I was violating a diplomatic arrangement when I cast this on a nap opponent's tile, right? So then what ended up happening is they attacked the province, and when they won, they were flagged as independent. And then I could attack immediately afterwards with my guys and take over their province. So this is a way to fight someone you have a nap against without breaking the nap in the in-game rules. Of course, everyone will know it's you, and you will get like a bad, reputation for it, but you could do it. It's not amazing for 15 gems because the villains suck and will like HP route the devas sometimes, but the devas will fly attack which can interrupt a buff script on a thug. So this is like a way to do counter raiding, in addition to the like sneaky way of breaking a nap, or of not breaking a nap. Okay, so that was a long section, and now one more section. We're gonna talk about some pretenders, and then this will be the last part. And I know this is a long video, and my throat's getting a little sore. I apologize. Okay, so because expansion is harder, you might actually want to consider an expander, which I normally would not have done in Dominions 5. Now, with Scales Nations, there's always an argument for expander because more land is good for scales nations that scale well. So you might want to take expander anyway. This is one I tried. So this chassis gives you access to additional production. So you can do now 3. This is not a great expander because he only has 13 natural prot. Now, with the way they change Earth Magic, you only get +3, and then you get at 4, you get Affliction Resistance 1. However, 16 protection is not enough to expand reliably, even with the fear, because he will get chopped down. I mean, his defense will go to 0 like extremely quickly, and then he'll get chopped to pieces with 16. So you really need hard skin. This will bring him up to 21. I have discovered from testing that even with 21, even with Affliction Resistance, he will still get afflictions, and he cannot expand into all provinces. He can't expand into barbarians. He can't expand into lots of heavy cav. Even some large provinces with like lots of heavy infantry were killing him, or like badly injuring him. So you have to be selective, and then of course you can only expand where you have Dominion, which is a problem. But he is stealthy, so he can spread Dominion by going to that square that's neutral and then standing there for a turn, and it will, spread the Dominion. But it slows down expansion. I tried it without Heart Skin with Magic 3, and I waited till I got Personal Stone Skin and Alteration 2. He still couldn't do it because Personal Stone Skin will bring him up to 19 protection, and that's not enough. Now, when you get to Alteration 3, it's trivial because he can do Body Ethereal and Personal Iron Skin, but that's too late for expansion. So you can do this with Hard Skin. However, this is not a great bless for the rest of your nation because you have no national troops to benefit from this. You have the flying Tengu guys, but like 5 extra protection is not going to do anything for them because they already have low protection. This will bring your this will bring these guys higher, but I mean, it's not that useful because like there's much better blesses you would rather do on them, and they can already do Personal Iron Skin and Personal Stone Skin. So this is not great. However, this chassis, if you do these paths, he can teleport, he can do sneak attacks or magic phase attacks, and then he can sneak away because he's stealthy. Also, he can cast like very high level Earth globals, like Riches from Beneath, which is very useful in this nation. So there is some utility to him outside of the expansion phase. Okay, so that's one option. I also tried an air expander. This is hard before you get Alteration 2 to get Personal Mistform. Once you do that, he can expand pretty easily because it's hard for the Indies to get through the Mistform, and he has Fear. Prior to that, it's very, very hard because 17 protection is not enough. And you can't do Mirror Image like you did in Dominions 5 because that's now a glamour spell. So you're really rolling the dice. I mean, with 3 magic, you could get like very close to. You can get the alteration 2 or very close to it, but like you're rolling the dice. You know, it's not reliable. So you're going to delay your expansion. However, one advantage is he can go underwater. So you don't have to rely on kappas to get underwater if you want to. But these are not super good paths for your sorcerers. You can give them Farcaster and a little bit of precision, but this is not great paths for them. Okay, so then we talked about this earlier in the video, but like if you want to go heavy scales, you really have to use this one, which he's not a great chassis. So I tried him imprisoned, which seems ridiculous for a Titan, but like the whole purpose of this is scale stick, right? So like now you have good scales, and unaging is very important on the Bakemono sorcerer because they're old age, and this will remove a lot of those penalties, especially for encumbrance. Also, because of how blesses have changed in Dominions 5, this is now possible to get both Farcaster and Arcane Finesse, which you could not do without like Astral 8 in Dominions 5. So this has some relevance. And then this was like a dormant version, but now with no nature. This was another one I made specifically so he could do Mother Oak, because we talked earlier about how Mother Oak is more valuable now in Dominion 6 because you have all those nature mages that give you glamour. But you can see this is not, like I called him Nature Scowls, but it's not really because you're only doing 1 and 2. So this is not like a true scales, but these are all very good blesses for your Bakemono sorcerers. Okay, and then just briefly, like you have a lot of new blesses, but unless you intend to use your Bakemono show as a thug, I don't think most of them are relevant to you, because like you don't have any national troops that are sacred, and like the only sacred summon troops you have are the Tengu, but you can't like easily natively cast them, and they're not very good anyway. You could conceivably put Dread or Awe on the Bless, and like you want to go maybe high glamour anyway because you have the new glamour mages, but you're really then relying on the Bakemono sorcerer to use them as a thug. Otherwise this Bless is useless. Okay, so those are my thoughts. I'm sure I missed something, but this video has already gone on very long, and I'm having a hard time speaking long, long time. All right, if you have any other thoughts or corrections, please, of course, add it to the comments, and thank you very much for watching my video.